Okay, you're live.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. I want to please call to order the City of Lake Worth Beach is February Planning and Zoning Board meeting tonight. This is February 3rd, 2021. Sherry, can we call the roll, please?
Sure. Greg Rice,
Here.
Anthony Murata,
Here.
Mark Hum,
Here.
Laura Starr, Robert Lipa,
Here.
Daniel Tanner,
Here.
and Juan Cotton. Danny, we know you're not here. Anyway,
I'm
Juan
here.
Cotton.
I'm here.
You have a quorum.
Okay.
We do have one. Thank you very much. With all that's going on in the world, I know sometimes we have skipped this part of the agenda, but if we could please, Mark, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this
Sure.
evening?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mark. We can always count on you to do that for us. You know all the words. Is there any additions, deletions, reordering? If not, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as printed? Sherry, everything copacetic, Sherry, the way it is right now?
I believe it is. The only question we had, and I'm going to ask Aaron this is, and we'll probably do it in the March meeting. We're going to need to have elections.
Yeah, we need to do it. I spoke with Pam before the meeting and she said it's just easier to do it in the March, but we need our annual organizational meeting.
So barring that, everything else will remain the same.
Thank you. What did I see? The elections. There's nothing on here for tonight's agenda
No.
addressing that. Okay. Thank you. All those in favor of accepting the agenda as published, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. Okay. Did we get the minutes distributed? A question that I love to ask Sherry.
We are very far behind in the minutes, but by the March meeting, I promise you'll probably have 2 to 3 sets.
Oh, it could take us half the night to approve all those minutes. It'd be like being at it'll be like being at an HRPB meeting. We'll go on midnight.
Our meetings were a touch long these days. They were a little bit lengthy.
And we like to try to not have the lengthy meetings because some of us worked all day and ran right home or right to City Hall and you know the rest. So anyway, but I do want to thank all of you for your diligence and efforts and your contributions to the city. It is certainly noted and appreciated. Okay, we'll take care of those meetings at a future date to be determined, or maybe not. Now's the time. I guess we're going to swear everybody in. Is that right, Aaron? Or can we do that in without
Pamela's not here. Why don't, if we actually, she's not quite online yet. I know Keith is working with her to get her online. I think if we could, I know we just said we were going to reorder the agenda, but we didn't realize we wouldn't have our city attorney right on. If we could just go straight maybe to the reorder and do new business item A first, and then go back to the swearing in and take the public hearing case.
we can do that.
Let's have our disclosures though.
Oh, sure. So the item would so I guess somebody would need to make a motion to reorder the agenda to hear board disclosures and then go straight to the FEMA flood map update.
Would somebody like to make that motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Need a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye, please.
Aye. Aye.
The ayes have it again. Thank you, guys. Okay, you heard the procedure, what we want to try to do. Do we have anybody on the board that needs to disclose anything so we can move on as it relates to the matters tonight?
No.
Thank you, Anthony. Laura?
No.
Thank you. Bob?
No.
Mark?
No.
Juan?
No.
Me either. I did disclose to Aaron that I did drive through the McDonald's drive-through line this week to get a Coke, but that's about my closest I came to this case. Okay.
Well, if that's a disclosure, I drove through the entire site tonight before I came here.
Good for you. Okay.
We have an unhappy Pamela who was finally able to connect after a lot of drama.
And I'm on my cell phone. It wouldn't connect to my computer.
Well, that's technology, Pam. That's technology.
So
So,
Pamela, we reordered the agenda so we could move forward from board disclosures to the FEMA flood map. We're going to take the swearing in after the presentation on FEMA.
okay,
Will that please you?
it pleases me very much. Something.
Well,
is-
that's all we're here for. That's the purpose of this group. Okay. Okay, moving right along. We do have a proof of publication that's in the file, and there's no withdrawals with proponents. Let's go right to new business A.
Thank you,
This
Mr.
is,
Chairman.
Go ahead.
Just for the record, Aaron Sita. Let me just go ahead and get here we are. And so tonight what we wanted to do is give you a presentation on the changing flood maps. So I'm going to just start off with some very introductory knowledge because we know we're not only speaking to you tonight, but we're also speaking to the public. I don't know how much of an audience we have on YouTube, but hopefully we have a few folks out there interested in what we're doing this evening. So basically, in the United States, there is the National Flood Insurance Program, and this program is administered by FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And the flood mapping that FEMA conducts is a large part of the NFIP, or the National Flood Insurance Program. And these flood maps are the basis of flood regulations and also flood insurance requirements. So FEMA governs us all, right? It's a national agency. The flood insurance program is a national program. And then so for compliance with the NFIP, what we do on the city side of things is we review new construction and renovation projects for compliance with program requirements. We participate in the CRS system, which is the community rating system. And I'll go into that a little bit more on the next slide. And that provides our participation, and that provides discounts to homeowners and business owners within our community who have a property that is located within a flood zone. And then as well, I just wanted to let you know that as part of the CRS program, we get a rating depending on the types of activities that we do. And we were recently awarded a rating of a 7, which was reduced from an 8, which is a good thing in CRS. That's a better thing. And so property owners within the city of Lake Worth Beach, as a result of the local government's participation in the program, get a 15% discount on their flood insurance premiums. So again, the CRS, this is a voluntary incentive program to encourage good policies, good governance related to flood mitigation. There are about 1,500 communities participating nationwide, including the city. Basically, there's kind of 3 program goals and that we are evaluated on. And that leads to determine what the discount rate is for the city. We need to reduce and avoid flood damage to insurable property. We need to strengthen and support aspects of the National Flood Insurance Program. This could be community outreach, things of that nature. And we need to foster comprehensive flood management. So there's a lot of activities involved with that. We're working very hard to continue to reduce our rating and to provide additional benefits. So getting beyond a 7 is pretty tough. So I'm sure Peter's up to the challenge. Hopefully we can do that, but we're doing our best. I provided a website at the bottom if you are interested in flood management and the community rating system. The FEMA website is available at the bottom of the page, and you can also just Google community rating system. So moving on, why are we here this evening? I know I gave you some background. I didn't want to talk about a lot of acronyms and things without kind of giving a little context to the presentation this evening. Basically, in January of 2020, we received a letter from FEMA that said FEMA has published these new maps, and while they're not officially adopted, we were required to use the new maps because they represent the best available data. And we'll go into that. That's a common practice with FEMA. So since January 2020, we're using the new maps. And so again, we'll talk more about it. Then we're going to talk about base flood elevation. So if you're in a flood zone, you're going to want to know what base flood elevation is. And when you're in a flood zone and you're thinking of an addition or new construction, we're going to talk about when do you need it elevate, what is a substantial improvement. And we're also going to talk about this evening where historic preservation and the National Flood Insurance Program meet. And then kind of just a brief contextual overview linking everything what we're talking about to coastal resiliency. So these maps, right? We've got these new maps. Everybody was impacted in Southeast Florida from the maps. They considered some new data, including wave action data. So the impacts are going to be, the new maps are going to be most strongly felt with new construction, additions, expansion, and substantial improvements within flood zones. They will be required to elevate their structures beyond what the previous requirement was. Some parts of the city, especially along South Lakeside Drive, may even have an elevation that is 12 feet above sea level. So that does not mean these structures will be elevated 12 feet in the air. It's 12 feet. So our current ground elevation, depending on where you are in the city, can run roughly around 4 feet. Peter can speak to that more. So, but that's still quite a substantial bump up for these new structures. Improvements to the existing buildings will be limited to a 5-year cumulative 50% value threshold. This is that substantial improvement thing. Basically, when over 5 years, if you improve your building to 50% of the building value, you trigger these requirements. So these are some pretty big requirements. Also an impact, larger areas of the city will now be required or are required to obtain and maintain flood insurance. Contributing structures, again, this is where historic meets flood. We'll still have some exemptions from these requirements with our base flood elevation variance. And then overall, we're going to see some impacts on some of the streetscapes and the character over time as we get investment and redevelopment within the city. So I'm going to turn this portion over to Peter because he's our, not only is he our building official, but he is the city's floodplain administrator. So we're going to get technical now. So Peter, are you online?
I am.
Okay, if you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, so in this slide, you see the new map, and it's the map of most of the city of Lake Worth Beach. And we're going to go through slides and see up close what and how these flood zones have changed. And there are significant changes. They've raised the flood elevation along the entire coast of Florida. What they did is they did a study between 2016 and 2020. And they went through and did wave data for the entire coastline of Florida. And that's data was used to create these maps. So if we want to go to the next slide, you will see on the left is the old map. Okay, and you can see, Federal Highway, and you can see the areas in pink on the old map are the flood hazard. The areas in yellow, orange, are, the 500-year flood zone. When you look on the right-hand side, they use different colors and different symbols. But if you look, the 500-year flood zone goes all the way out to Federal Highway. Okay, and the the actual flood zone goes to Ocean Breeze. This is the north end, okay, College Park. And you look at the wave, you look at the maps and you can see that the flood zones have gone significantly farther to the west from the intercoastal. So this is College Park before and after. And on the south side, the next map, if you look at the actual flood zone crosses Federal Highway in several places. So if you look at along 6th Avenue, you can see it crosses, and you can go to 10th Avenue and it crosses Federal Highway. There's also a black line with flags on it. And that's what is now called the LIMWA, or Area of Limited Moderate Wave Action. So what that means is you can no longer have shallow foundations. The standard Florida construction is you bring in some dirt, do a monolithic slab, and you're done. In that area with the black line now, you have to do a deep foundation. You cannot do shallow foundations. The other thing that changed on the map is the elevations went significantly up. There are places on the south side where the actual flood elevation went from 6 to 8 feet. And there was one example of a recent resident that I spoke with. Their flood zone went from 8 to 11 feet. So, you're talking about 2, sometimes 3 feet of elevation that they have to go up additional. So it's rather significant. Okay, and so if you look at this slide here, it shows an elevated at flood elevation and below flood elevation. And there are significant differences in premium, whether you are above, below, or at. And that's something to talk to insurance agents about, but it is not a little amount of money when you're below base flood elevation. Next slide.
Peter, I just want to add here, we do have a general email at bpermits@lakeworthbeach.fl.gov. So if you are considering a new design or a new addition and you believe you're in a flood zone, it's a good idea to send an email, and we'll get back to you on what your flood zone is and what some of the things that you need to consider.
Thank you, Erin. So this picture gives you a good picture of elevation, okay? And you have your AE zone, which is the standard flood zone. You have your VE flood zone, which you have your still water elevation, and then you have your wave crest. The VE zone has a 1 to 3 foot wave action built into the flood elevation. And one difference between AE and VE is the AE elevation. That is for your finished floor. In a VE zone, the elevation is for the lowest horizontal member. So, if you have a VE zone with a base flood elevation of 11 feet, your house is going to be somewhere between 13, 14 feet for the finished floor elevation. So it's a rather significant change, as far as how high these houses are going to be. So you're going to get, an old house, and then you have somebody building according to the new regulations, and they're going to be 4 feet above the house next door for their finished floor.
And Peter, I just want to add, I know sometimes people hear, they hear 14 feet above sea level or 10 feet above sea level or 8 feet above sea level, but sea level is not ground elevation. So already when you're on the ground, you're above sea level a little bit. So what does maybe a good thing to add here is, what is our elevation approximately, just general range within the city?
The general range in the area along the intercoastal is anywhere between 5 and 7 feet. Okay, your king tides, just for information, average about 5 feet. So that's your king tide. So if you have a base flood elevation of 8 feet and you have a storm come in at king tide, you've only got 2 feet of comfort. before your storm surge is going to come and inundate your house. So there's not a lot of elevation safety in this number. They seem very high, but they're not really all that high if you get a significant storm surge. So when do we need to elevate? Okay, all building improvement projects that are a substantial improvement or new construction will need to elevate to the current map requirements. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go into a substantial improvement there's two different definitions. The building code has one definition and FEMA has another one, and they're completely different standards. So with the FEMA definition it's 50% of the market value of the structure before the start of construction or the improvement. And that is determined either through an appraisal or through any recognized government thing. So for example, the property appraiser, you can use that number if you're comfortable with that, or a lot of people now are getting appraisals by licensed appraisers because the property appraiser's value is always low. So when you do exceed more than 50% of the structure and your house is below the base flood elevation, you are going to be required to elevate that structure to the new elevation. If you are doing an addition and it's considered a substantial improvement, you're going to need to elevate both the addition and the old structure to the new requirements. In the building code, it has the different definition, and it's 50% of the building area. So, you're talking about apples and oranges, but for the elevation, we go by the FEMA definitions. It's market value before start of the construction. Next.
So I'm just going to say, if you have some technical questions about this component or related to base flood elevation, let's go ahead and ask those now. We have a second part of this presentation that's going to talk about the historic preservation aspects, the variance that's available, and some other comp plan policies and things. So if you all have any questions for Peter, now would be a great time.
Peter, Bob Lipa here. I do have a question since Golf View's mentioned on there. Will the city be doing anything with the golf course or the park, Bryan Park, to the south end?
So that's kind of a policy discussion that's broader than this. This is really for individual homes that are being built. I know that that's in discussion at the commission level, but it's kind of outside the scope of.
Thank you. I have a question for Peter. It's more of a technical question because we deal with this. We've been dealing with this for 10 years already, like in Sarasota. The Keys, it's really bad. It's to the point where people are self-insuring because the insurance is prohibitive with all the flood issues that the Keys have at the moment. And in Miami Beach. Do you know specifically on the freeboard, if you would determine the freeboard, or is that in the matrix that is provided?
So the freeboard, it used to be, you just had to do base flood elevation. In the last iteration of the code, they added 1 foot freeboard throughout the entire state of Florida. And that carried over to the latest code. So your freeboard is designated by state, the state of Florida for the building code. And then local municipalities can add additional freeboard to get credit on their CRS program for additional points.
Yeah, we Miami Beach has a big program on that, and we worked with their whole freeboard situation, and it actually helps with a lot of different things. So I'd be interested to see what Lake Worth does with it. I don't know.
We're at 1 foot, and we haven't chosen to go beyond the 1 foot. We definitely have a little bit more elevation than Miami Beach, though, for sure. And they are doing some amazingly innovative things down there because they have to, you know.
Cool.
Hey, Peter.
Yes.
Peter Greg Rice here. You said it's required if you're in a flood zone, the city requires that you have flood insurance. Even if you have no mortgage, the city can make that requirement. And
No.
number two, since these maps change from time to time, and I'm sure a lot of property owners, property owners don't always look at these maps when they first are redone or resent out or whatever. How do we notify those people that now they're required to have flood insurance when for maybe years they've had the property, never had that request made?
Okay, so it's a two-part question and I'll answer it in two parts. Number one, flood insurance is only mandated when you have a federally backed mortgage. So if you own your home outright, you do not, or I should say own your own home outright, or do not have a federally backed mortgage, you do not have to have flood insurance. That's question number one. The second part of your question, I have a two-part answer for. I would recommend to you as leaders in the city to reach out to everyone you know that's east of Federal Highway. And if they do not have flood insurance and they have a mortgage, to get the flood insurance policy now. And the reason for that is if you have an existing policy and the maps change, you get to keep the old rate and they gradually bump it up to meet the new rate or what the new rate would be. So you're kind of grandfathered in. As far as the city notifying the residents, that would be a decision that would need to be made at the council level. That's something that could be discussed,
And I just want to add, Peter, to that, part of what we're doing tonight is what Peter said is we're reaching out to you as community leaders, and we're also we're going to do the same presentation for the Historic Preservation Board. And we're also hoping to roll this out to neighborhood groups as well. So if it all works out, we're hoping that Parrot Cove might be our first stop. So we're planning to present this if we can to neighborhood meetings and other things to get the word out. But ultimately, until you need to do something on your property, we don't go in and require you to elevate your property if you're just living in your house. When you want to renovate your house, or you want to add an addition, or you want to build a new home on a vacant lot, you would come in and then these rules would apply. So if you're just living in your house and you don't have a federally backed mortgage, then they think you might not ever bump into them. And we don't notify you of if you need insurance for your mortgage. The mortgage company usually is pretty on top of that. That's not a city function. We have enough
Yes,
to
there.
do. Don't manage your mortgage.
One more question. I'm a native Floridian and have owned at least a house since I was probably just out of high school, and I remember that there was these imaginary lines that are drawn in the sand, more or less. I remember when my first house that I bought, the insurance agent simply asked, "Are you east or west of I-95?" And for some reason, I said, "What difference does that make?" He said, "Well, that's a hurricane line, and if you're east of 95, it's a different rate than west of 95." And I'm thinking, do the hurricane gods look at these maps and know that they can't cross those boundaries or whatever? How do they determine that? It's beyond me. And there's probably no good answer for that, but I've always thought that to be kind of humorous.
I can speak to that question. And the lines of the map are what they did is they did a LiDAR, which is they overflew the area. And they determined that the average elevation in these areas are 6 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet. So then what they did is they took the wave study and they kind of superimposed these lines over the elevation data. And that's how they came up with, okay, this is your area that's lower. And so this is where the waves are going to go. And that's why it's kind of a squiggly line. But you are absolutely right. The water doesn't know that the 8-foot line is on the other side at your neighbor's house and not on your house. So I always say that, if your house is very close to the 7-foot line, elevate to 8 feet just to be safe.
Or do like me and move onto the 5th floor of a building, so you got a little more time to think about it, worry about it.
I have a question. How do they determine? So, for example, we haven't really had a storm in the last 10 to 15 years, or maybe not that. I might be speaking out of turn. Let's just say in the last 10 years that I've been in Lake Worth, we haven't had a storm that really had any flood issues in these areas. How do they go about determining that it's important, or to now push these lines in and requiring the elevations to go up?
It was a multi-million-dollar study over many years using topographic data, which is the LIDAR data that Peter was talking about. So they looked at elevation. LIDAR measures elevation, but it measures it. The data that they have now is square meter data. It's incredibly detailed, and that's why they have the squiggly lines now. Is it less than a square meter? I can't even remember. It's probably like a half meter now. So they really have a very detailed point elevation data beyond what they've ever had. And then, as Peter said, they've done also a wave action study. And so if all these things came to be, there is a flood risk. And Peter, maybe you can talk about being in a floodplain. Doesn't mean that you'll flood. It means there's a chance, right? So can you talk about that maybe?
So as far as the flood zone, you have your 100-year flood zone, your 500-year flood zone. So as far as you have a 1% chance of flooding every year, but just to let you know, there are certain areas on the map, especially right around Federal Highway and 6th Avenue, that flooded 3 times this year because we had 300-year events just a couple months ago. So just because it's stated 100-year flood zone, you don't have a chance once in every 100 years of getting a flood zone. You have a 1% chance every year of getting flooded there, but it doesn't mean you can't have 3 events in 1 year.
And the particulars of your lot and of your structure and, of all the things that are local as well will impact your flood risk. So what they did is they model, but FEMA models for the region. So they fly the LIDAR and they model the wave action, and they do it for each, they map each kind of coast segment. And we're in that Palm Beach coast segment. So, so they'll do that.
They did 37 transects where they modeled the waves in 37 different portions of Palm Beach County. And there are 2 transects that actually cross the Lake Worth map. So, it's pretty accurate information that they have in these. And also the computer modeling has gotten so much better, even over the last, 3 years since they did the map. So, there's a lot more data that went into these studies.
But like I said, it's a 1% risk annually. So it's not like you're going to flood every year, or, your lot may be high. There's some properties that were built relatively high, especially some of our historic structures are quite high.
I appreciate that. And when does this actually go into effect? I know you'd made mention that we have some time
Now,
to be proactive before it goes into effect to get that grandfathered in rate.
The latest that I heard, and this is about 2 months old, is they're talking about in the 2nd or 3rd quarter of this year, they're trying to push the maps through to get them adopted. Palm Beach County, West Palm Beach, and several other municipalities have challenged the data and the maps. And they're still waiting to hear back on the challenges that were given. So, you may have 3 months, you may have 6 months. We will know 90 days in advance once the maps are finalized. And then, it's a scramble. But anybody who's in those areas who does not have flood insurance and may be required to it, it would be a great service to, a great savings to them to get the insurance before the maps change instead of after. Because again, if you're BFE +1 now and the maps change and you go up 2 feet, now you're BFE -1. And the difference in 2012 was BFE +1 is 41 cents per $100 of insured value and premium. BFE -1 is, I believe, last time I checked, $3.70 per $100 of insured value. Huge difference.
So like I said, now. If you are in that risk area, it's a good idea to pull the trigger on that. But definitely talk to your insurance agent. That's really outside the scope of what we do. But I definitely, I myself am kind of closer to the coast and have made
I have a
pulled the
question.
trigger on that.
I have a question for Mr. Ringel. Were property values in Lake Worth affected by this? Did the property appraiser take this into account and decrease the value of properties in Lake Worth as a result of the revised FEMA maps?
No.
No?
I would not have an
Are you
answer.
sure? Are you positive, Erin?
I'm not 100% positive, but I believe our property value increased because
I was
property
specifically
value
told-
looks at sales and they also look at improvements. So I think we had, Peter, and new building permits and an investment in that we've had over $200 million of investment last year.
That's not my
That's-
question. That's not my question. The appraised values by the property appraiser for Palm Beach County on appraised values, not the investments in Lake Worth and the increase in properties in Lake Worth. I'm talking about the property appraiser for the county.
Yeah, they consider sales data and they also consider new permits and new investments.
That's not my question. My question is, did the values in Lake Worth, were values decreased as a result of the FEMA maps?
I don't believe they did because our values increased, but I will follow up with
That's
them
not
and confirm.
accurate. That's not accurate.
I will
Yeah,
follow up
would
with them
not
and
be able to
confirm.
answer that question. That would be something to take up with the property appraiser.
Yeah, we can follow up for you and get a final answer, but I don't believe that that was the case. And keep in mind as well that this was, that this change in maps was not for Lake Worth Beach. This change in maps was for the region.
Right, well, then why is West Palm Beach contesting it?
West Palm Beach, they used the different, or what West Palm Beach's contention is that the LiDAR data used was not the most and best available. It was older data and they had newer LiDAR data that was not used for the map. And that is the basis of their appeal to the map. I was in the meeting when they discussed that, and my basic position was that nothing has changed significantly enough within the boundaries of the city of Lake Worth Beach to challenge the data, because there has been no real grading or raising or elevating of significant portions of the city that would affect the map.
Did the rating change for West Palm Beach similarly to Lake Worth?
I would not be able to answer that question. But if you just drive around, West Palm Beach or, most of Palm Beach County, I do not have access, and I did not, request access to the data from that.
Well, yeah, the reason I'm asking is because I do drive around and I see that from probably the Middle Bridge all the way to Lake Worth, there are signs up and West Palm Beach is basically underwater. Many days, there's signs up that say flood zone, flooding, and you try and get down the streets, you can't even get down the streets. I've never seen anything like that in Lake Worth, ever.
If you go down to 18th Avenue South on King Tides, you'll see water coming out of the storm drains.
Okay, well, on the north end, I've never seen it.
Yeah, I have not seen it on the north end, but there are areas, throughout Palm Beach County that will flood during the King Tides just because of elevation.
I recall at some of the meetings when they were rolling out the data as well, that I know an area that was impacted by the new maps was the area around in Boynton Beach, around their downtown on Ocean. That was an area that I know got definitely higher ratings. They're quite low. And there were some other places in Delray that got theirs bumped up. From what we understood, what FEMA presented was that generally in the coastal areas, that there was a general bump up countywide, depending on the specific LiDAR elevation of each parcel and each area. So I do know some of the low areas, especially the inlets and things like that, got impacted a little bit more in the county. And I think you are right, Laura. The north end, if you look at, and Peter, you can speak to this, I believe the base flood elevations for the AE zones, they're much lower on the north end, generally speaking, not everywhere, but generally speaking, than on the south end. 'Cause there is a
The
little-
elevations are the same on the north end and the south end. Okay, the difference being the north end has a higher, for lack of a better word, natural grade. So that's why you don't see the flood zones extending so far to the west, because the natural grade there is a little bit higher than on the south end.
Mhm.
Can we see the map, including the north and the south end of the city?
So it's you really can't zoom out that far, but I think if you look here at Federal Highway, here is what Peter was talking about around 6th and 12th. And then you can look up, here's College Park. And then again, you can see Federal here. So
How
it's
about
just-
our downtown section, the section from, say, 6th to 6th?
Where did it go? Oh, there it is.
And what does the yellow mean? The yellow section?
Yellow is
The
just
red,
the
pink-
roads.
Well, no,
Okay, so if
the
you
yellow,
go on the
pink-
map on the right, I'm sorry, on the left,
Yeah.
the yellow is the 500-year flood zone, and the pink is the 100-year flood zone. Okay, and now they do the white shaded with the polka dot for the 500, and the light blue dots for the 100-year flood zone.
So this is the 100-year here, and this is the 500-year with the polka dots. And
Okay,
then
so
this is the wave action line that Peter was talking about.
the one on the left is the current, and the one on the right is the proposed.
Correct.
Got you. Now, yeah, I'm just trying to understand so that I could, I know a lot of people that are affected, and I'd like to share this information with them, especially about trying to be proactive.
So I think, so just to clarify, if you bring an application in now, you will have to comply with the new data on the right. So what Peter was speaking about with relative to the flood insurance would be the map on the left, Peter. The current, or sorry, the older map still regulates the rate at this time, you said?
Correct. The 2016 map is the one that is used when you're applying for a mortgage now. As soon as the new maps are adopted, that's when every homeowner in that area, if they have a federally backed mortgage, is going to receive a nice note from their bank saying, hey, you're required to get flood insurance. And it's going to come as a complete surprise to these people, because most people do not pay attention to this.
So we have a case, so I'm going to go ahead and have us move on. We're going to continue the discussions about this unless there's any more specific questions.
I have one question,
Oh.
if I may, before we move on.
Sure.
Peter, do you happen to know that, since we're talking about the homeowners, since many of the homes in Lake Worth are frame homes and therefore they're elevated, they're not slab on grade, do we know if there is any thoughts that FEMA may be looking at assistance programs such as they do in Monroe County, although they have pretty serious ones down there where they'll actually buy homes in repeat flood areas. But for things like flood vents and basic things that homeowners can do, I'm just curious if you've heard if there's going to be any thoughts of those types of programs.
There is always money from FEMA available for grants. It's just a matter of, you have to apply and qualify for them. And, right now at this time, we haven't put any thought into, making any application for grants, or, it gets a little bit on the complicated side anytime you deal with any kind of federal grants, because there's a lot of regulations and paperwork that need to be administered and monitored. And, at this time, there's no staff dedicated, or, it would be difficult, it would be a difficult undertaking, at this time to do something along that line.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, is this map, some of this information ever going to find a place on our city website?
I believe on the city website, there is a link. I can check on that. And if not, we can, add a link. Palm Beach County has a wonderful flood map site. All you have to do is type in your address and it'll tell you the old flood zone and the proposed flood zone by parcel.
It might be helpful if we can link some of that information. We don't have to put all the color pictures and all that, but we can link some of that information somewhere near, the first few pages of our website.
If you wanted to, just for the listeners or for the board members, if you are interested, if you Google Palm Beach County flood zones, it'll take you to their, just give me a quick second here and I'll, let me stop sharing this and start sharing something else. I want to show you the website real quick before we go on. So this is what it looks like here. And you would just click here and type in your address. Again, all I did is Google Palm Beach County flood. I don't have this marked. Or what you can do is you can obviously zoom in. But as Peter always warns me as the floodplain administrator, he said, don't use the map to get your base flood elevation. If you are in the design phase, make sure you contact Peter through the email, the general building permit email that's on the website, and get your base flood elevation. So you can see that here and you can zoom in. So it's it's a nice feature just to kind of get the feel for it. And again, all you have to do is Google Palm Beach County flood zones, and this maps.co Palm Beach Florida.us will pop up for you. Okay, let me get back to where I'm supposed to be.
Thank you, Aaron.
That's weird. Okay, there we go. All right, I think we're back on the presentation. Can you all see that? So I'm gonna have Jordan take the lead now, and we're gonna just talk a little bit about historic preservation. And a lot of our areas, not all, but a large portion of our coastline is within a historic district. Jordan, do you want to go ahead and take the lead on this?
Sure, thank you, Erin. Well, for the record, this is Jordan Hodges, and I'm the Senior Historic Preservation Coordinator. So I am staffed to the Historic Resources Preservation Board. But Lake Worth Beach currently has 6 historic districts covering about 2,700 parcels, with a significant amount of those parcels located within flood zones. But structures within historic districts are evaluated utilizing criteria established by the National Park Service to determine whether a structure could be designated as historic. And the structures that meet these criteria can be designated as contributing resources to a historic district. These buildings utilize local protections established through our Historic Preservation Ordinance to prevent adverse alterations, which could affect the historic significance of a building. But there are also buildings that are not currently considered historic, but that are located within a historic district boundary. These are considered non-contributing resources. And one of the most common reasons why buildings within our historic districts are considered non-contributing is because they did not meet the minimum 50-year age requirement to be considered eligible for a historic designation at the time our districts were created. Our historic districts were established mostly in the late 1990s and early 2000s, which was over 20 years ago. So a lot of our mid-century buildings that are located in flood zones are not currently designated because of when they were surveyed, they were only 35 or 40 years old. Now that's important because the only exemption in the Florida Building Code to allow for substantial improvements or additions to properties or two properties that do not comply with the new base flood elevation requirements. Those are designated historic structures. They're the only buildings that get exemptions. Now, from 2015 to 2020, our city was awarded around $200,000 worth of grant monies from the Florida Division of Historic Resources to resurvey our historic districts. And that survey shows that the majority of the structures currently designated as non-contributing, those buildings are eligible for reclassification as contributing buildings with the adoption of the new surveys. We do currently have an administrative process in place to allow for non-contributing structures to become contributing if the new surveys support it and the homeowners would like to change their status. But if your property is located outside of a historic district and potentially meets the designation criteria in our historic preservation ordinance, your property can be evaluated for an individual designation. And this is when a property owner voluntarily applies for designation or for a historic status. And this designation would be reviewed by staff, sent to HRPB, and then reviewed by City Commission. You can go to the next slide. Thank you, Erin. But becoming a designated historic structure or a contributing building, again, these are protected by local ordinance. So these buildings require a review for any exterior alterations to the property for compliance with the regulations set forth in the Historic Preservation Ordinance and in our design guidelines. And once a property becomes a historic building, becomes individually designated, there are no mechanisms available to remove that historic designation. So someone couldn't apply for a historic designation, use the variance to do an addition or a substantial improvement, and then remove the historic designation. But the city's certificate of appropriateness review criteria, they're not overly onerous, but staff or the HRPB would review requests such as window and door replacement, roof replacement, additions, things like that, to determine if the request is architecturally appropriate or compatible for the building. And the city adopted our historic preservation design guidelines back in 2018 as an educational resource to property owners. And if you haven't had a chance to review it, you should. There's a lot of really great information on the city's history, our historic districts, prominent architectural styles, compatible replacement options for property improvements. Now, I was saying the Florida Building Code allows for a variance from base flood elevation requirements for designated historic structures. And this is because the strict interpretation of the Florida Building Code could result in alterations to a building, which cause it to lose its historic character or change it in such a way that the building would be unrecognizable from its original appearance, which could result in the de-designation of that building. And if you look at the text in red, it states that our historic preservation program has to still recognize the property as historic once the work performed under the variance is complete. And that's determined through design review by the Historic Resources Preservation Board and the certificate of appropriateness process. Below shown are the considerations for a historic building. And since the city operates a municipal historic preservation program, and as we designated the resource to begin with, we would fall under category 3. The city's land development regulations also provide a variance from the flood resistant construction requirements in the Florida Building Code. And this is again reviewed by the HRPB, but it adds the criteria that the variance is the minimum necessary to preserve the historic character and design of the resource. And I'll show you some examples. So this is a property at 1020 South Lakeside Drive, and this is a substantial improvement case. So this is, what here? So the building is a mid-century ranch, and these buildings are typically characterized as being a single story, being low-lying horizontal buildings. Now on the top image, you can see a rear flat roof addition to the building that was, I think, done in the 60s or 70s. And the homeowners wanted to remove that and undergo a complete interior and exterior renovation and add a more substantial rear addition that was in keeping with the architectural character of the house. And this plan would have tripped the substantial improvement threshold. So the entire building and the addition would have had been raised a couple feet to comply with the new maps, which would have been very expensive and would have permanently altered the kind of massing and character and design of the building. So the building is located in the South Palm Park Local Historic District, but it had a non-contributing designation status. But again, those new surveys that we just produced listed the buildings as eligible for a contributing status. So the homeowners requested a redesignation, and with this, they were able to present their case before the HRPB, who found that the variance was required to maintain the building's contributing status. And I believe this project is still under construction.
And I think that's a common what we anticipate with this in the historic district, is that there are some homes and people are paying flood insurance for those homes and they want to add or substantially renovate them. But in doing so would require them to really maybe lift that structure as much as 3 feet in some areas. And doing so would be cost prohibitive to the property owner. So in the historic district, this is a real advantage, especially for some of those at-grade properties.
Okay, so this is an addition example that went forth last year. And in this case, the property owner was planning a small 2-story addition that you can see in the proposed front perspective drawing. So the current base flood standards would have placed the floor of the addition much higher than the floor of the existing structure, which would have made it very visually apparent from the street. And the HRPB reviewed this application and also determined that a variance to allow the addition to stay at the structure's existing floor height and not have to raise the additional for the new maps was necessary, as the addition, constructed significantly higher than the floor would have adversely affected the integrity of the building and possibly preclude it from a contributing status. But homeowners may also elect to voluntarily elevate their buildings. This process would also be reviewed by the HRPB. Of course, some architectural styles and construction methods are going to be more easily elevated than others. This little frame cottage on South L Street was not raised to meet flood requirements, but our goal will be to elevate buildings in a sensitive manner to the style of architecture in which they were designed, as shown here. So again, homeowners can still elect to raise their buildings or potentially utilize the variance to maintain their building or any subsequent additions at their current floor height.
And I will say that currently within the historic district, we've been able to manage the elevation of structures so that they're contextually appropriate. What we will be looking at down the road as a potential option, should people be interested in it, is maybe some design criteria or something for the areas outside of the historic district to make sure that the new construction or folks that have elected to elevate their structure to that they are contextually appropriate as well to the neighborhood, to maintain that neighborhood character in so much as feasible. I'm just going to go ahead and wrap up and thank you to Jordan and Peter for being here tonight. They're both subject matter experts, and we're very lucky to have them on our team. Taking this all back and wrapping it back up to the big picture, what you've heard about is there's a shift in the regulatory requirements that reflect some of our changing conditions that we're facing in South Florida. And we're called the Department of Community Sustainability. Community sustainability is a focus of our comp plan and our land development requirements. And really, a sustainable community is a combination of things. It has a local healthy environment, quality of life, economic vitality. But we also need to be a resilient community. And that is the ability of the community to adapt to changing conditions. And this include increased flood risk in coastal communities in South Florida. So I just wanted to mention that we already address these types of things in broad policies and objectives. And locally, we do participate in the Southeast Florida Climate Compact with data sharing. And there's also an interesting case study that was just published by the ULI called The Business Case for Resilience, which does discuss adaptation strategies and might be a good kind of starter for what we're going to start looking at. In addition, the City of Lake Worth Beach participates in the Coastal Resilience Partnership of Southeast Palm Beach County. This is a local multi-jurisdictional climate change vulnerability assessment. So we're going to have some data, some very localized data, not only as a result of some of this FEMA data, but some additional data and then some sea level rise data as well to kind of get a handle on where things are going and what kind of strategies are going to help protect our neighborhoods and ensure our community character. And I listed the website. You can just Google again, Coastal Resilience Partnership, Southeast Palm Beach County, but you can also go to the Palm Beach County webpage. They're hosting the partnership or the assessment webpage on the county page. Throughout South Florida, I know Juan mentioned Miami Beach. Miami Beach has done a tremendous amount of effort as far as looking at mitigating and adapting to increasing flood risk. There's all kinds of communities all over South Florida that are developing or have developed these adaptation strategies. As our staff, we're going to be evaluating grant opportunities. We're going to be looking at some of this new data coming out of the vulnerability assessment, examples from other Southeast Florida communities to inform future changes to the code and design guidelines over the next couple of years. We're going to start to look at this. And right now, we're just at the beginning of where this is impacting us. So we're definitely looking forward to getting ahead of the curve. And you know, we're much luckier here in Palm Beach County than in Monroe County or Miami-Dade County or even Broward County. Really and maybe Peter can speak to this a little bit more, but that we really start getting a little bit more elevation as you come into Palm Beach County. So so we're quite lucky as far as I think we're one of the highest areas in the South Florida counties. So that's a real benefit for us. So Peter, did you have, and basically that concludes my presentation. If you have any more questions for Peter or me or Jordan about historic preservation, we're here and then we'll get on with our case.
Well, thank you very much. And I guess that's it for tonight's edition of This Old House. But anyhow, it is a lot to consider here, and obviously there's pluses and minuses to everything. But I think it's beneficial that we try to get the word out to the community so that they can be more well informed. And I want to thank everybody for their participation in this portion of tonight's meeting.
And Greg, I just want to add, I think that as staff, we're looking to this as the beginning of this conversation. Right. So this is the initial kickoff. And as we get more data from our vulnerability assessment and as we understand things a little bit more, really tonight was just on the narrow scope of what FEMA has done, but this is a continued conversation with you all as board members, with the city commission and with our neighborhoods.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, moving right along. Now that Pam, are you still with us? Pam?
Pam is still here, yes.
There she is. She runs back to her desk.
I'm sitting here.
We, because you were not online with us or whatever, we need to swear in everybody else now so that we can discuss new business B.
Yes, that is correct.
So Sherry,
yes, and I'm going to ask Brian and Rob to start their video and unmute, please.
Thank you.
Anyone else who's giving testimony as well?
Anyone else? Staff included, I'm sure.
Okay, beautiful. We're ready. So everyone planning on giving testimony, please raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Continuing following our agenda. This is new business B. It's a request by Brian Sherman of Sloan Consulting on behalf of the Arbor Square Realty Company, LLC, for a blanket conditional use permit at 2505 North Dixie Highway. It's within the mixed use Dixie Highway and MU Dixie Highway zoning district. So who's, oh, I think this is Lexus. Lexus, is this yours tonight?
Yes, this will be me.
Well,
So
I'll
good
hand it
evening,
off to
everyone.
you and be dynamic if you would.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. For the record, I'm Alexis Rosenberg, Senior Community Planner, and I'm going to be presenting new business item B, consideration of a request by Brian Sherman of Sloan Consulting, Inc. on behalf of Arbor Square Realty Co. LLC for a blanket conditional use permit at 2505 North Dixie Highway, commonly known as Arbor Square. The site's located at 2505 North Dixie Highway, which is on the southwest corner of North Dixie Highway and the West Palm Beach Canal, also known as the C51 Canal. The site contains an existing retail plaza with 20 leasable retail spaces, totaling 67,450 square feet, and it has 353 parking spaces. The site is zoned mixed-use Dixie Highway with a future land use designation of mixed-use east. As mentioned, the applicant is Brian Sherman of Sloan Consulting, Inc., and the property owner is Arbor Square Realty Co., LLC. And the applicant is requesting a blanket conditional use permit to allow the following uses: single destination commercial, single destination retail, administrative professional service offices, business service offices, medical office, health clinic urgent care, pharmacy drugstore, veterinary office without kennel, printing services, catering or caterer, gym, dance studio, fitness studio, and retail bakery. Going into the existing conditions, these photos were taken on January 28th, 2021, showing the different views of the commercial plaza. The property received a minor site plan amendment approval on August 10th of 2020 for facade renovations, landscape improvements, and other related site plan improvements. And they're currently in the process of completing the renovations. The table here outlines the future land use, zoning districts, and current uses of the properties that surround the subject site. Based on staff's analysis, the proposed blanket conditional use permit proposes uses that are consistent with the intent of the mixed-use Dixie Highway zoning district and are compatible with the surrounding uses. So as part of the conditional use permit review, the Department of Community Sustainability is tasked to review the application for consistency with the city's land development regulations and for compliance with the findings for granting all conditional uses. So the detailed staff analysis is outlined in pages 3 through 13 in the staff report. Walking you through the analysis quickly, the proposal is found to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, the city's strategic plan, the general findings to harmony with the land development regulations and protection of the public interest, and the specific standards for all conditional uses. The proposal also complies with the specific use criteria for all single destination retail and commercial uses, medical related uses, and pharmacies. The analysis for the specific use criteria is located in pages 9 through 13 of the staff report. So the site is technically an existing legal nonconformity in that the site exceeds the maximum allowed impermeable surface area and the placement of the existing building exceeds the maximum allowed front setback of 22 feet. However, the site was approved by the city and developed in 1978, which was prior to the existing impermeable surface area and setback regulations. You may recall that on June 17th, 2020, a conditional use permit was approved by this board for the establishment of a single destination retail use known as Family Dollar. The conditional use permit was conditioned to work with staff to bring the site into compliance with the land development regulations and the major thoroughfare design guidelines as much as feasibly possible through the minor site plan amendment process. And as mentioned on August 10th, 2020, the minor site plan amendment was approved. As it relates to active code cases, the city's database shows that there are 2 outstanding code cases that the applicant is working to resolve through the improvements associated with the minor site plan amendment. The proposed use within the blanket conditional use permit application meets the criteria of the comprehensive plan and land development regulations. Therefore, staff is recommending approval with conditions outlined in the staff report. However, before I conclude my presentation, I would like to inform the board that staff is recommending to exclude condition 1A, as the applicant is working with the city attorney, Pamela Ryan, on an agreement that relates to remedying the code case violations and when business licenses can be issued. So that concludes my presentation. The conditions of approval are outlined in pages 13 and 14 of the staff report. I have those slides available in case you guys wanted to go over any of those conditions, and the applicant is also here if you wish to ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis.
Thanks.
So let me get this straight. The condition 1 is off the table, you're saying, for right now? Because that's in progress, or?
Correct. So we wanted to strike that condition out because the city attorney is currently working with the applicant to allow businesses to apply for their business license. So the condition contradicted that. So that's why we wanted to strike that one out.
Okay, and I'm not going to try to monopolize all the questioning, but one more thing. How many of these conditional or blanket approvals have we granted or whatever over the years? I don't remember having one.
I think the last one was a few years ago. It's definitely been a while. Typically, we encourage owners of plazas or sometimes, industrial areas to apply for a blanket conditional use permit when multiple different types of tenants with maybe similar types of uses will be coming in. So this was brought up because based on the square footage of some of the spaces in the plaza, a lot of uses that we're proposing to come in required a conditional. So we encourage the applicant to apply for the blanket conditional use so they wouldn't have to come in every single time for conditional use.
Well, it does make some sense, that's for sure. Okay, board members, now we know where we're starting from. Who has questions?
If you don't mind, I do have 2 questions. First
Take
off,
the floor, Mr. Lipa.
thank you, sir. How long has Arbor Squared owned that property?
Maybe the applicant can, Mr. Schweitzer, can you address how long you've owned the property?
Rob, you're gonna have to.
Yeah. Approximately 30 years.
Okay, and what you're asking us to take off the thing here is the liens for violations. Am I correct on that, Alexis?
No.
So let me go back.
And I can address that if you guys want me to.
Sure.
Go ahead, Pamela.
Okay, so this property had some significant code enforcement violations, most of which the property owner took care of immediately. There's only one outstanding violation right now, and it concerns a dumpster enclosure. And we've put it to the side because he's making so many significant renovations that if we forced him to put a dumpster enclosure in a certain location now, it is going to move in the next, it would have moved and is going to move in the next couple of months. So we thought it didn't make sense to hold up his renovations, hold up him getting business licenses for his other tenants because of the dumpster enclosure. So the agreement that I have drafted, spoke with his attorney this morning, I think we'll finalize it before the end of this week, guarantees that he has to have the dumpster enclosure completed, intact in the next few months. And he has agreed to that. At that point, the violations will go away. There are no liens on the property right now. And so he just had a violation. And so we didn't want that to be a condition of approval because it would contradict the settlement agreement that I'm trying to enter into with.
And that makes sense, and I understand that, but if they've been there for 30 years and liens have appeared and liens have gone away, probably because of trying to rehab the building. I understand the dumpster, but no sense in building an enclosure only to destroy it and move it once the rehab's done. But I just basically wanted that on record that should have never really happened, the lanes to begin with. I used to live near that, very close to that, and have seen it. The other thing that we're giving a blanket approval on is the parking lot, the impermeable surface. Isn't there any way paver bricks could go in part of that parking lot so that there's more permeability?
So whenever we review a site plan or a conditional use, and you may recall this from the Family Dollar, is we work with the applicant to comply as much as possible with all of these requirements. So we had the property owner go through the conditional approval process for Family Dollar, and we had several conditions of approval related to the single destination retail use. That specific one, he was concurrently processing a minor site plan amendment. So there's some additional landscaping he needs to complete. There's a lot of other things, but just the way that it's parked, there wasn't a lot of opportunity to increase that pervious surface. So we kind of went with what was originally approved, but but there is going to be some additional landscaping and screening and some other requirements that came as part of the conditional use this summer, and that we made part of the site plan application in the fall.
Thank you. And the additional landscaping is well needed. But coming back to impermeable, can't paver bricks be used instead of asphalt in part of that lot?
We did not require it, and they have an approved site plan. So the site has had asphalt parking for some time. We do push applicants to comply as much as possible, but what we worked out is we did everything that we asked for, everything that we thought that we could, and he has an approval. So.
Okay, and then I hear what you're saying. The last question that I have is the project description. The 9, 10, however many businesses are there already businesses lined up to come in, or is that what they're hoping to attract?
I believe it's a mixture of both, but I think Rob can expand on it a little bit more.
And I want to say that we asked Mr. Schweitzer to please identify businesses he thought would be commonplace, and to submit for him and Mr. Sherman to submit a host of standard uses, and that's what they did. Do you all want to address that, Mr. Schweitzer?
Yes, so Family Dollar is currently in, as we mentioned. We are in the process of finalizing a lease with Presidente Supermarkets. This will be their 69th store location. And we have a couple medical offices pending, waiting on the approval of the conditional use. And regarding the dumpsters, I could say that they've already been permitted and they're under construction and will be completed by the end of February. And they are also shown on the approved site plan that we did several months ago, the locations of them.
Thank you.
I have questions.
Go right ahead, Lloyd.
Has
Go ahead, Ms. Dyer.
the landscaping improvements already been done?
They're approximately 60, 70% complete. And we have a meeting this Friday with the city landscape official to do additional landscaping around the west and north property line, in addition to what's already been permitted and approved.
Do you have irrigation in there?
We do.
I visited the property today and saw the condition of the landscaping, and it is I can tell you at the entry, there's a tree laying down.
So we've done,
A brand new tree
we've
that's put in is
installed
laying
trees,
down.
we've done trimming. There's still a lot of shrubbery and beds and mulching to be done. We're waiting to finish construction to do that at the end, so we do not damage any of the new installations.
The mature trees on the site, have those trees you're saying have been trimmed?
Trees have been trimmed.
The
And
mature
new trees
trees
have
on
been,
the
in
site?
addition, new trees have been installed.
No, the
per the-
mature trees on the site, have those ever been trimmed? Because they look like, I've lived there a long time, they don't look like they've ever been trimmed.
They've definitely been trimmed about Brian, about 3-4 weeks ago, we had an arborist do the
Yeah,
trimming on the existing trees.
that's correct.
And the parking lot and the, is that the way it's gonna stay? Or is there something being done for like the uneven surfaces and the potholes?
Those have been repaired 6 or 7 months ago. We spent $70,000 doing root pruning, leveling asphalt, curb repairs, seal coating, striping in an effort to close out those items on the code violation. The only remaining item to be completed on the code violation was the construction. Actually, it said to pull a permit to construct dumpsters, which has been pulled and they're under construction. All those items have been completed for 4 or 5 months now.
So the way it is now, the surface is exactly the way it's gonna be.
For the most part, when we're done, we're going to reseal and seal coat areas around the perimeter of the building and the rear of the building that have been impacted by the improvements to the facade and building.
There's two entries to this property on Dixie. The northernmost entry, when you enter and depart, there's a huge dip. Is that, whose responsibility is that? And I'm saying dip like DIP, big decline. Is
Well,
that-
I would say that the elevations and drainage and stormwater flow meets the design of these paving and grading plan for the project. If there was a dip and there's a concern, I would be absolutely happy to address it. I'll have to go back and look at it, but we're here to do the right thing and make the property most aesthetically pleasing as possible. And that's why we've invested $1.5 million into the improvements.
It's a very narrow entry, and if this says that there's going to be the number of vehicles that they say could possibly be going in and out of there every day, cars are not going to be able to get in and out of there quickly because it's a very narrow entry.
Well, it's an ingress only, and the ingress is at the traffic light. It's not a two-way entry
It's ingress only.
per the approved site plan.
Okay, so cars should not be coming out of there?
Correct.
Is there any signage that indicates that?
There is.
Okay, well, I saw cars going out.
They're probably breaking the law.
Okay, I didn't see any signage. And going around the building on the north side, all the way around the building, that road that goes around the north part of the building, has anything been done to repair that?
Once the new dumpster enclosures are completed, we are going to mill and resurface the north side of the building roadway. It's not a requirement, it's per our permit, that's something that we are planning on doing and will do.
The dumpster enclosure that you're talking about, is that the partially completed building on the south side of the building, the concrete block?
There's 2 dumpster enclosures. There's one located in the northwest corner of the site, and there's one located in the southwest corner of the site. When they're completed, the dumpsters along the north property line, along the roadway, subject roadway, they'll be removed, and we're going to mill and resurface that roadway.
So you'll no longer, the dumpsters that are now visible will no longer be visible from the C-51 side?
That's correct. In addition, there'll be a cocoa plum hedge down the whole length of that canal. And also on the back of the building, we've added stucco banding and there's 2 different paint schemes to make it more aesthetically pleasing. In addition, we've repaired all the gutters and a lot of the wiring and low voltage AT&T Comcast lines have all been cleaned up.
Have you seen your sign out front that has the graffiti all over it?
No, what sign are you referring to? Is it a leasing sign?
Yes.
That sign's going to be removed in the next few weeks.
Yes, Rob, it's the rendering sign of the property.
Right.
That's your graffiti marks, but that would be taken down.
It has graffiti on it, just so you know.
Well, we paint graffiti on a weekly, monthly basis, it seems there. And I know recently the sheriff arrested a middle-aged man that was charged with graffitiing 40, 50 different properties in the area. So a lot of that has gone away, but there's still, from time to time, the person that comes around and does that. And we take care of that or repaint over it within days of the event. We've been
What
doing
would-
it for years.
What will you be doing to ensure that Presidente Supermarket has shopping carts that we don't find all over Lake Worth?
I'll have to discuss that with Presidente, but I believe that they have mechanisms on the carts to prevent them from leaving the property. In addition, we're investing into a $30,000 security camera system around the property and additional signage. And we've engaged with the sheriff's office and have put up posted signs, and the sheriff will also be able to police the property. I feel that once the supermarket is leased and the cameras are up and the signage, that a lot of these issues are going to go away. And that's been my experience on other properties.
Laura, if you wanted to add conditions of approval, like pertaining specifically to the shopping cart issue for the single destination retail, what we could do is add a general, if the board wanted to, they could add a general condition of approval saying that any single destination retail use would require a shopping cart plan to be reviewed at or when they come in for building permit.
Okay.
So if you guys want to go there, anything, so what staff did is they provided a set of standard conditions for these general uses. If there is an additional condition that is concerning to you, that's something that you can add tonight.
And I also want to add, and I think Pam might remember this, I believe there's a shopping cart ordinance. I'd have to read
There
over
is,
it.
yes, there's definitely a shopping cart ordinance. And frankly, we should make sure that he has a copy of it. It's been in effect for at least a year, maybe longer.
Okay.
But Rob, your tenants should be made aware of the shopping cart ordinance.
I'm happy to do that. And they will be.
Thank you.
So you want to have Scott Maxwell deliver it for him? We could
We'll
do that.
get that
yeah.
over to him in an email as a follow-up from the meeting.
We could do that. It's an election year. I'm sure they'd be falling all over each other for the opportunity. Anybody else got a question?
Yeah, I do.
Questions? Who just said that? I didn't hear it.
Mark,
Mark, go ahead, Mark. Thank you, sir.
you've had the laundromat there for a long time, and I didn't see that. Is that fall under a different definition of the people leasing there?
So I can jump in. If the laundromat, and I can double check the business licensing on this property, but if the laundromat's currently there, then technically it's allowed to stay there. And as long as the business license does not lapse for a period more than 6 months after the business license has expired, then a new one could go in there without having to go through an additional approval. But Rob, is there one there at this time?
Laundromat? There's
Right.
a coin laundry that's been there as long as I can remember.
Okay.
So I would just say something as intensive as a laundromat, that's not a typical retail or medical office use, something like that, that would be something that we would not support any blanket conditional use type of use. That would need, if that business leaves and it's vacant for 6 months, we'd want to see that come back in and go through the appropriate process.
Or I don't see anything, I don't know, it might fall under the designation of single destination commercial or single destination retail. There's a hair salon, nail salon, pizza parlor, vacuum store. Are those considered single destination or?
Alexis, can you please share the code? Do we have the definitions from the code for those two items?
Yeah, so I can share the definition from the code. And then also I wanted to add that a majority of the spaces in the plaza are under 2,500 square feet. So in the use table, a lot of restaurant uses or general retail uses under 2,500 square feet are permitted by right. Most of the conditional use permits are for intense uses that are at a smaller size or larger sized uses, such as the supermarket that's going to exceed 7,500 square feet. Let me see if I can pull up the definition real quick.
While she's looking, here are the uses that are on the table. If you as the board, we lost it. So we'll get it back. If you as the board see a use that is concerning to you, you're like, maybe we don't want this in the blanket conditional use. that is also, could be part of your motion, is to remove that particular use from the request.
So things that include, or things that are inclusive of a single destination commercial would be things like, they say auction rooms, appliance equipment sales, bait shops, building material and trade supply establishments, mostly retail type establishments that may provide a few services, where single destination retail is usually more strictly retail. So that would be things like a grocery store, a beauty supply store, convenience store, hardware store, antique shops, etc.
And then you can see the single destination is more what you think of like grocery and things like that.
So typically a lot of these uses at a low intensity, which would be an area under 2,500 square feet, may be permitted by right or may just require an administrative review. However, once these uses get over 7,500 square feet, that's when a conditional use permit is required most of the time.
I would say that, sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the single of the uses proposed, one of the heavier use categories is the single destination commercial use.
Can I ask a couple? I want to ask a couple questions about lighting.
Hey, go ahead. Wait a minute, excuse me. Mark, are you
noticed-
finished?
Yeah, I've noticed.
Now I am, yeah.
Well,
Good.
let Mark finish.
Yeah, I wasn't complaining about the laundromat. I've used it different times, and I think that you're doing a good job there. I just didn't see it listed, but I saw, when I went through the other day, it was there, and I just wanted to make sure it was staying there. It was more just a personal question. The times on the medical related uses are 8 to 8, and then on the back page, the drugstore is 7 to 10. Is that a difference that?
Yes, so the medical related uses are going to be things like a medical office, a doctor's office, a dentist's office, where that's going to be the time, the code restricts the times that can be open is from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Where the other use that you were looking at, that's going to be specifically a pharmacy or drugstore, and those can be open between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m.
Okay. And then the last thing here is in 2, item D, the engaging vignettes. Who judges those?
So I know we have the CRA, they have approved vignette displays. So we've applied this in the past. Usually we'll direct the applicant to contact the CRA, and then they will show them some pre-approved vignette displays, and then they would apply for a building permit, and it gets reviewed by planning and zoning, and I believe building too, but mainly planning and zoning.
And I know that's kind of funny language, you know what I mean? It's not, you know, as commonly, but that is the language in our code. So it's the idea is that it activates the space, and it just doesn't look like a vacant, empty storefront.
It is very engaging. So
It's lyrical, right?
yeah, I like
Just
it.
like the vignettes should be.
Does your baby?
Laura, let me ask one question real quick. Pam, this is probably for you. When we're talking about medical procedures or whatever, about doctor's offices or what have you, in those set hours, 8 to 8 or whatever. Now that grocery stores, i.e. Publix, they're getting into the business of administering vaccines against the coronavirus, could that be deemed by some to be medically related, and therefore if cause Publix to try to cause Publix to close their doors at 8 o'clock instead of 10 or 11 or whatever they're open to now? How do we handle that if that does happen?
So really what you're talking about is those types of uses are really not single destination retail. They're what we would really consider single destination commercial, which is they have a retail component, but they offer another type of service on site in conjunction. So, the medical related uses would not apply, but they would be governed as a single destination commercial use because they provide an accessory service. And that's how we would regulate them. So for example, Walmart come in, we wouldn't give Walmart a medical office approval. We would regulate it as a Walmart and, but it would be governed under the approval for single destination commercial. So.
Thank
Pharmacies,
you.
the pharmacies inside Publix do close at 8 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
My question, Mark, are you done? Or-
I'm done.
I wanted to ask
Go ahead,
about,
Laura.
I wanted to ask about lighting. I've noticed a lot of stores in Lake Worth now are putting up this lighting that is this very bright blinking stuff that goes around it. There's one at the the Hookah Lounge on 13th and Dixie. It's this very, very bright lighting that frames the entire front window.
It's neon string light that she's talking about.
Oh, yeah. And I know, so that, and then now on the north end, all the way up across from where this is gonna be, across from Thrift World, there's a strip mall, like where the British Depot is. There's two places in there now that have that string light around it. The new, the guy who bought the liquor store now has it, and the barber shop has it. What is Lake Worth's position on that lighting?
Well, technically those lights are not allowed, specifically because especially any blinking or moving lights. We are going to be revisiting our sign codes because just like, technology evolves to really look at that particular type of lighting as in a very specific way. So it's really, we don't consider that it's approved. We have been in compassionate code enforcement. So we have not been visiting properties to discuss. We have let people know that they need to remove the lights. There's places that when I drive by, sometimes things are blinking now and code is starting to call them and say you can't have blinking lights or moving lights, but some of them are still, and those are technically not permitted, but it needs to be, I think, a little bit clearer in the code. And one of our tasks this year is to go back and look at the sign code as a whole for compliance with the Supreme Court decision Reed, and among other things, look at what else new innovations have been done in temporary lighting for commercial businesses as well, and address those.
I think while we're doing it, we might have also want to look at something much more simpler than that, but it's springing up everywhere. I think they're called feather signs that says open, come on in, or whatever. I'm seeing those being temporarily placed up and down Lake Avenue in our downtown corridor. And not the most attractive thing.
Yeah, those are not permitted by our sign code. They're not allowed.
Oh,
so.
I know that. And I'm sure they know that too, but.
They do. So like I said, we've been kind of in this compassionate code enforcement moment. So I think as we come out of COVID, we're going to be re-engaging on sign code enforcement. And
might be a good time to do it. Thank you. Anybody else have questions for
Laura
staff
brought
or
up a question that said, the lighting question. For the developers, or what type of lighting will you have at the plaza? I assume there will be the ones in the parking lot. What will be underneath the canopy? Will there be lights there? And when will they be on versus when will they be off?
So I wish we had the renderings of the improvements available for you to see.
Let me see if I could bring that up actually.
Because currently the parking lot is at 2.5 foot candles. We're improving the parking lot lighting to 5 foot candles. In addition, all the existing 4-inch steel columns are now going to be between 2.5 by 2.5 to 5.5 by 5.5 wrapped columns with coral stone with sconces attached to each one. In addition, all the underlighting under the covered walkways are going to be removed and replaced with LED lighting. So it's going to be a very illuminated, a safe, desirable place to go shop and destinate for meals or your shopping. But there's definitely significant lighting improvements that are taking place. All the work will be done within the next 45 days. And you can see in the rent, thank you for putting up the renderings, but you can see this, the sconces on all the new improved columns in addition to all the improved underlighting and parking lot lighting upgrades.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask the applicant a question? I know I'm staff, but I just wanted to check with Mr. Schweitzer. You're going to be painting your metal mansard roof, correct? The silver from the green?
Correct.
Well, the renderings are attractive as far as I'm concerned. I mean, certainly a lot better than what we've seen there in the last, since the last time you were here.
And what kind of security will you have? I know you mentioned cameras. I see some in the pictures on the front of the building, the Pantel. Who will be monitoring those security cameras?
The management company. In addition to the tenants and the police department.
Is your management
Well, I
company?
say and the police department, if they choose to, we will provide them access. But we've engaged with the police department to patrol, and they have the authority to remove people from the property.
Is your management company, is their office on-site or off-site at one of your other properties?
Off-site. I'll have remote access to the cameras on my phone, and I will monitor it on a regular basis.
And will
Anybody
there
else
still-
have any questions?
Will there still be access to World Thrift next door?
Yes.
Parking lot? Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, may I add one more point for your board discussion and consideration?
Please.
I just noticed approval for money business services, which would be a check cashing store or the like, is permitted under single destination commercial with a separate approval. But I think it would be wise to clarify in the condition that the money business services use would need to go back to the board. If just as a point of clarification, it would need to, but sometimes it's nice when it's neat and tidy in the condition. So if you all wanted to add that, that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Back to the board. Anybody have any questions, comments, ideas? That being said, would anybody care or be interested to make a motion, either for or against or what have you? Now might be a good time to start. Stage fright.
Alexis, do you want to put up the list of uses for the board so they can see what they're
Please.
approving?
What is a business service office?
Business service office, it's similar to an administrative office. Let me read the definition just so it's a little bit more clear. One moment. So we have a definition for business services. So it's any commercial activity primarily conducted in an office, not involving the sale of goods or commodities available in the office, and not dispensing personal services, and includes such businesses as real estate broker, insurance offices, accountants, financial institutions, photographic studios, credit reporting agencies, telephone answering services, or other similar uses.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, Mr. Tanner.
I move to approve PZB project number 20-005-00019 with staff recommended conditions for a blanket conditional use permit to allow the requested uses on page 1 at 2505 North Dixie Highway. The application meets the application
Friday, we have plans Saturday with Rachel and David.
The application meets the conditional use criteria based on the data and analysis in the staff report. Should I read the consequence action and the attachments or no?
No, don't worry about that. But I would just add that that included the modification with the condition 1 stricken, Mr. Tanner, and the addition of the money business services are excluded from the single destination commercial, correct? Both of those modifications?
That is correct, with number 1 stricken and with the money services excluded from that blanket conditional use permit.
What
Second the motion.
What about the shopping carts?
Second.
Shopping cart is already covered.
We have to make,
under,
we have to make that a condition.
there's already a zoning ordinance for shopping carts in the city. Is that correct?
Yes, and Pam, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the shopping cart ordinance requires businesses with shopping carts to have a plan to maintain the shopping carts on the site. Is that right?
That is correct. And we need to make sure that we don't need the motion to address it, but we certainly need to make sure that the property owner has a copy of the ordinance and that he comes up with a plan for his tenants, or his tenants come up with a plan and provide it to the city. It is an ordinance that is in effect.
I'm pulling up the code, Pam, here, and I'm just highlighting the area. It says a shopping cart owner shall submit to the city container a containment plan. I apologize. The containment plan at a minimum shall identify the name of the retail establishments, its address, and the retention system selected by the shopping cart owner. This is what is required.
Correct.
Pam, do you feel that we need to add anything to that as a part of this?
I don't really think you can. The shopping cart ordinance is, I mean, we can say, if you want, comply with the shopping cart ordinance as a condition so that he's aware that he has to do it.
Can we make the applicant equally responsible for that as we would the retail establishment?
What does it say? What's the code section? I'm not sure if the code section puts the onus on the property owner or on the business owner.
It's section 19-13.
Well, it says for shopping cart owners, so that would be whoever owns the shopping carts, the first sentence of the ordinance.
Okay.
They'll screw up her lunch.
Shopping cart owner means any person or entity that owns a shopping cart or furnishes a shopping cart for use. So it's not for the Rob, it would be for the owner of the shopping cart.
Correct. But our approval is being given to Rob on behalf of any of his potential tenants. Can we hold him equally responsible to ensure that the rules are followed for the shopping carts?
You cannot under this ordinance. No, you can't.
What
In
about
fact,
this
there's
conditional
also,
use?
I hate to say this, believe it or not, there's also a Florida statute on this, and we could not even run afoul of that.
Okay.
Of statute. So I would not suggest you add this as a part of it. There's a shopping cart.
The legislature at times preempts local governments with
Right.
regulations. And so thank goodness we have Pam here. I can't keep them all in my head all the time they're preempted for things. So
Well,
that's
guys,
why we have the attorney here.
We have a host of ordinances. We can't single out each one.
Right. I would say not to do it because I'm telling you that under Florida statute, we wouldn't be able to enforce it against him.
Well, you're waiving a bunch of liens for him, aren't you?
No, and I can't recall who said it initially. There have been problems with this property over the years, lots of problems. There are no current liens that I have found that are existing on the property right now. There were violations, but most of the violations were taken care of. So he doesn't actually owe the city any money for liens. Otherwise, he'd be in trouble. I don't think we would be having this conversation if he owed liens on the properties right now.
No.
Okay.
And the condition was just written as a standard condition, as an umbrella, like liens and code violations generally. We didn't see the specific liens related to the property, and we'll take a note of that, Ms. Starr, and so we'll be clearer next time.
And we have the advice.
But what we can do, and I think this is what we need to do, we need to make sure that business owners are given a copy of this ordinance instead of relying on them reading our code. That's a different issue, but I'm not even sure that they're aware of the shopping cart ordinance.
Okay.
Well, I think if we're gonna deliver it to them, maybe we should also deliver it to the property owner too, maybe,
Sure. Sure.
So we don't have to, every time there's a possible tenant that's gonna have shopping carts, we gotta run out there and remind them.
Right.
Stipulation, it's given with the lease.
Right.
We
Any
can make
other-
that a condition. We want to make that a condition?
Shopping carts are a problem,
They are a
and
big
so
problem.
to make that a condition would be great.
Well, I mean,
How do we notify property owners about that?
the rules are in place. We're not probably enforcing the rules that are already in place. What's the purpose of adding new rules if we can't enforce the current rules that are already in place?
Well, that was going to be another comment I was going to make. When will the city come by and start enforcing some of our ordinances? And then there was silence.
I thought that was a rhetorical question.
Crickets. Guys, I think we need to follow the advice of our more than competent counsel, and especially advice rendered at a public meeting that's been recorded, seen around the world via the internet. So I
Wow.
think
My phone.
I'd like to say that the shopping carts are not a problem. It's the people that are pushing them and leaving them in the parking lots and taking them all over the city. The shopping carts are functional the way they are. They are not the issue. It's people.
Exactly. Well said, Mr. Hone.
Thank you.
So we have a motion, and I believe I heard a second. Can't remember who said it.
I have a second one.
Juan.
Okay, Juan, thank you. It's the Bob and Juan show. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Anybody else have any comments, concerns? If not, I'm going to call for the vote. Do we need to go down the row and let Sherry take the vote? Sherry?
Yes.
Sherry?
Sure. Greg,
Yes,
Anthony,
but I really should be voting last.
Aye.
Daniel,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Juan,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Laura.
Yes.
You have it.
We have a unanimous decision. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Good luck, gentlemen, on your renovation, remodel, whatever the term we're going to use. But if it turns out like those artist renderings do, it's going to be a nice welcome as people come in on Dixie Highway into the city. So thank you.
Well, thank everybody for your approval, and we look forward to completing the project, and I think everybody will be happy with the end product.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. We're about finished here.
Yes, we are, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you. I'm sorry.
Now, let's bring this baby around, bring her in for a landing. Do we have any planning issues that we need to be aware of?
We do tonight. I wanted to share something with you. I have been really excited because I have been learning about how to use our reporting system here on our planning and zoning. So I wanted to share some data with you that I thought was very interesting. And, we talked a lot about what's been going on this year. It's been a little crazy, right? You guys have seen it on your agendas. We've got a lot cooking and in the middle of a global pandemic, which is pretty crazy, but also pretty great. So I wanted to just talk about the total planning and zoning applications. And this includes as well as the planning and zoning review that's done within the historic district by our historic preservation planners, as well as the planning and zoning review that's done by Alexis and Andrew. And first of all, we've had a 13% increase overall in our applications over 2019 to 2020. Then in addition, we had the real story is that the type of applications that we're increasing with, which are these more substantive applications that require rigorous review and more project management by our staff that are often involve new construction or additions or renovations. So we've had a 225% increase in our site plan applications. We reviewed 52 site plans last year, 16 conditional uses, and 4 plan developments. So you can see that there was, going through everything, this was a pretty big year for us. And in addition, I just want to mention and give a shout out to our staff because they have done all of this work, all of this very detailed work. And our building permits were up last year as well, post-COVID. So we get in anywhere between 225 and 300 building permits a month. About half of those require planning and zoning or historic preservation review on average. So on top of all of the public information that our planners are addressing, our dramatic increase in really substantive applications, they're also reviewing a large number of building permits as well. So I just wanted to give them a shout out and share that wonderful information about all the activity and investment that's happening within the city.
Aaron, what are the 4 planned developments that were done in 2020?
So these were applications, they're not done. So
That's what I mean. That's what I'm sorry. You're right.
Yes. So this was obviously Village Flats, the Bohemian came through, the Gulfstream applied, but we haven't completed them yet. And what was
We also had Casa Bella apply, which is it's on Batwell Road, off of 10th Avenue behind the extended stay hotel.
Yes. And we've gotten in, and we've probably gotten in at least 1, 2. Are we at 3 new ones this year? We're already at 2 or 3 new ones this year already, just in January.
Yes. Yeah, I think we're actually at 4 this year already.
Oh my goodness. It's going to be another big year for us. So so just know we're busy. If you get somebody says you can't reach us, well, obviously we're here working. So just leave a message and send us an email and we'll get back to you.
Well, you're not working under, in this case, a lot of stress and strain and being broken up all over the place and trying to do the dodging the bullet as far as the coronavirus goes and working from home and going back and forth and what have you. A lot of people in this country have been doing the same thing, but you've been shorthanded for quite some time. So you add that to not knowing where your desk is tomorrow or what have you. What you're going to be in the office, you're going to be at home, you're going to be wherever. Hats off to you because it was a hectic year, one like we've never seen before. Hopefully we won't have to see it quite like this ever again, but good job, guys. Really good job.
We have an amazing team here. We really do. And there are a lot of really young up and coming planners who are smart and capable and hardworking and diligent. And I couldn't be prouder of them.
Well, you should be very proud and you guys have done a great job. So that being said, anything else on this list that we need to, any board member comments?
No, I thought we'd end with good news since our presentation was kind of depressing.
Well, Okay, well, with that being said, thank you, board members, for, like I said, for all that you've done for this city and helping moving things forward. it does take a village, as they say, and we all have differences of opinion, and that's one of the great things about a board like this, is we have a chance to bring those out in public in a forum like this and refine some of those ideas that on first on first reading might sound a little far-fetched or whatever, but good job, everybody. And I guess if that being said, unless we have another emergency meeting or whatever, like we did last month, I'd like to call February already, the February Lake Worth Planning and Zoning meeting adjourned. Have a super weekend, guys. Hope your teams win.
Thank you all for your time and your volunteer.